You are listening to Model Mentality. Welcome to Let's Get Clinical by Dr. Ali. In this segment, I explore connecting the dots between our guests' personal stories and the larger mental health context. You've been listening to my interview with Bridget Malcolm, my co-host on Model Mentality. Let's review what we've heard from Bridget's story. She started modeling at age 14 and started altering her food intake also at the same age, until she had more serious symptoms like her hair falling out, low energy to the point that she could not work or think clearly. She did not realize how dangerous her eating habits had become. She mentions a few times that she needed to drown out her emotions and that the control around her food intake helped her to feel numb. In her early years, Bridget's anxiety was channeled around food. Later in her mid-20s, the anxiety became more severe and was found to be cyclical, linked to her menstrual cycle. Concurrently, alcohol abuse was becoming a larger issue for Bridget, and the Me Too movement emerged and brought to the surface all of the emotions of Bridget's earlier history of sexual assault both outside of and within the workplace. At the time of when this podcast interview was recorded, Bridget had been sober for 90 days and had been and is now on the road to feeling her emotions, confronting her ghosts, and being more present in her life than she ever has been. Although there is a lot to expand upon from Bridget's story, the two clinical themes that I would like to highlight are 1. The need to numb out emotions, and 2. Premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or PMDD. So what's the pattern in Bridget's story about the need to numb out her emotions? If we go back to the time in her life where she described that the control around eating helped to numb out her emotions, what I hear in this is that her emotions, whether conscious or not, were difficult for her to tolerate, and she found safety in feeling numb. That strategy may work in the short term, but in the long term, it does not bode well for emotional balance, and as we hear in her story, the solution lies elsewhere. So with regard to those heavy emotions, my mind immediately jumps to the questions. What are those emotions about? And could she have been better served by working through the emotions in the hands of a skilled therapist rather than avoiding them or feeling the need to numb them out by altering her eating habits? Of course, this is easier said than done. She may not have been aware of the need to confront how she was feeling until things progressed. In a similar light, in her mid-20s, when she was starting to experience more anxiety, alcohol abuse was also emerging as an issue, and this was around the time that the Me Too movement was taking place, and I would speculate the alcohol served a purpose to calm down the anxiety. The focus on alcohol, similar to her focus on eating habits, drowned out her emotions. In psychiatry, as we know, alcohol use and anxiety often go hand in hand. Now with her sobriety, her recovery, and her work in therapy, Bridget is directly addressing the emotions which were underlying both the eating habits as well as reaching for alcohol. Moving to the second topic, let's talk about Bridget's diagnosis of premenstrual dysphoric disorder, or PMDD, that she was given at the age of 26, 1 year after she started to experience anxiety attacks. So what is PMDD? PMDD is a form of depression that affects about 5% of women of childbearing age. Some of the symptoms include mood swings, irritability, anger, feeling down or at times hopeless, with overwhelming negative thoughts, anxiety, tension, or feeling on edge. And these symptoms show up at a discrete time during the menstrual cycle, usually starting the week before. As we heard in Bridget's story, before she found the right treatment, she would experience 3 days of severe anxiety, followed by 7 days of depression every month. So what to do? If this sounds like you can start to track your symptoms and see if there's a pattern around your menstrual cycle and report back to your doctor. The caution here is to not self-diagnose and instead seek help from a provider who can help to evaluate what you are experiencing. A healthcare provider or psychiatrist can first look for other explanations, such as medical causes, and screen for substances such as drugs, alcohol, and prescription pills, which may explain in part or in full the cause of the symptoms. The good news is that there is treatment available, and you can feel better too, as Bridget does today, with the right treatment in place. The only other thing to add here is the part that Bridget mentioned about her having suicidal thoughts when starting a certain medication and feeling improved on another. The takeaway here is that if you feel suicidal, this needs immediate attention and evaluation by a clinician. Bridget knew to seek help, and with the help of her providers, identified the underlying issue and quickly found a way forward. For some of you, this may be difficult to listen to or feel heavy. The great news is that Bridget is on the road to recovery. We are sharing her story so that you can personally see the dichotomy between the stunning external images of Bridget and her most personal and inner struggles that she has faced. We want you to understand that you are not alone, that there is power in speaking up and in asking for and receiving help. For Bridget, no doubt that this is the case, and I'm honored to know her and work with her so that we can continue to open up the dialogue on mental health together. Thanks for listening to Let's Get Clinical by Dr. Ali. Please check our show notes for references and more information on this episode. As always, if you are in crisis or you think you may have an emergency, call your doctor or 911 immediately. If you're having suicidal thoughts, call the National Suicide Prevention Lifeline at 1-800-273-TALK. That's 1-800-273-8255 to talk to a skilled, trained counselor at a crisis center in your area at any time. If you are located outside of the United States, call your local emergency line immediately. What you have heard on Model Mentality does not represent what would take place during a psychiatric assessment or an actual therapy session.
Thanks so much for listening to this episode of Model Mentality. If you like today's content, please subscribe to Model Mentality or wherever you get your podcasts. And while you're there, don't forget to rate and review us. Model Mentality is brought to you by Mind Studios.